In the USSR, as you know, there is no sex. However, few people know that this famous phrase ended like this: we have love. The USSR is indeed the first country in the world in which women for the first time in history legally received equal rights with men. For the first time in history, they became equal both in family and in love. That's just asceticism in the sexual sphere in the USSR appeared in the 30s, when the young state became stronger, and at the very beginning, after the revolution, this was happening in the sphere of intimacy, where there is a sexual revolution in the states. I guarantee you will be shocked. How was the whole old world sent to the dustbin of history, and marriage and family were declared bourgeois remnants? Why did the ladies walk down the street literally without pants, but with a hat on? Is it true that there was a decree that transferred all women to the property of the people and socialized them? Every Komsomol member is obliged to surrender to any Komsomol member at the first request. Did such a rule really exist? No flirting. A lover should be selected based on the interests of the party. Where are the hippies? Were the Soviet communards the discoverers of free love? And really, the satisfaction of sexual thirst under communism should have been as simple as a sip of water. Is it true that in cities they wanted to install booths in order to satisfy this natural human need in between? So, what are they, the 12 sexual commandments of the proletariat? The revolution of the 17th year was a real storm. They now wanted to subject literally all spheres of human life to reconstruction. It is difficult for us today to imagine how much everything has changed. But among the conquests of the revolutionary proletariat was absolute sexual freedom. Now universal equality also covered the family sphere. Circles began to appear all over Russia. Down with innocence. Down with marriage. Down with the family. Down with the shame. H.G. Wells, who visited revolutionary Moscow at that time, was surprised at how simple it was with sex in the country of victorious socialism. Unnecessarily simple. So meet our heroine, the daughter of the Tsarist General Alexander Kollontai. A young lady from a decent family, Alexandra Kollontai, took over the entire sphere of intimacy in the party and became a major theorist in this field. In fact, she became the initiator of feminism in its Soviet version. But unlike the famous suffragettes, Alexandra Kollontai dreamed not just of voting rights for women or equating them with men. No, she wanted to create a fundamentally new society, a new relationship between a man and a woman, built on different principles. And after the revolution, she had such an opportunity. It is our heroine who is credited with the so-called theory of a glass of water. Its essence is that under communism, they say, the satisfaction of sexual needs should be no different from the satisfaction of other basic needs. He, they say, just needs to be freed from conditionality, so that it would be as easy as drinking a glass of water. In fact, this theory existed long before Alexander Kollontai. In the 19th century, another leader of the struggle for emancipation, Georges Sand, said, "Love, like a glass of water, is given to the one who asks for it." But Kollontai only developed her idea, arguing that intimacy should be recognized as an act not shameful or sinful, but natural and legitimate, like quenching hunger or thirst. She really became the most important revolutionary in the sphere of love. Alexandra Kollontai has set as her main task the destruction of traditional marriage. In her program article titled The Road to the Winged Iris, it was written that a new love should go beyond the monogamous married or just loving couple. At the same time, Kollontai herself said, "I am for free love." Many people misinterpret this position of mine, like a glass of water. No, I am an enemy of vulgarity and licentiousness. Love for me is first of all poetry. The society took her idea in a peculiar way, especially men, the most advanced class, Komsomol members. They even demanded to install love booths in cities, by analogy with toilet booths. In such booths, they say, everyone could satisfy their needs at any time as simply as other, natural needs. Unlimited freedom in everything, as humanity has repeatedly observed, quickly turned into a madhouse. Every Komsomol member is obliged to surrender to any Komsomol member on demand, if he regularly pays membership fees and is engaged in public work. Such a clause, according to one version, was included in the draft of the first charter of the RKSM. Well, Komsomol members, church marriage was recognized as a bourgeois relic. No wonder the poet Demian the Poor spoke out, "Why the hell should we register a marriage, if we can do that?" Here is what the famous communist Sofia Smitovich wrote about the new morality of youth in the newspaper Pravda. She indignantly denounces the existing mores. Everyone, even a minor Komsomol member and every student of the labor faculty has the right and is obliged to satisfy their sexual needs. This concept is made with an axiom, and abstinence is considered as a limitation inherent in bourgeois thinking. If a man lusts after a young girl, be she a student, a worker, then the girl must obey this lust, otherwise she will be considered a bourgeois daughter, unworthy of being called a true communist. In response, the editorial office of the newspaper Pravda was simply flooded with letters from girls from all over the country. I will quote one of the letters. Students look askance at those Komsomol girls who refuse to engage in sexual intercourse with them. They consider them petty bourgeois retrogrades who cannot free themselves from outdated prejudices. Students are dominated by the idea that not only abstinence, but also motherhood should be treated as a bourgeois ideology. As a result, collective fatherhood appeared, when a child with a mother was taken from the maternity hospital by several potential fathers at once. Children from such free unions were massively handed over to the care of the state, and soon it became a real problem. Bulgakov wrote in his diary in September 1924 year. News. The other day, completely naked people appeared in Moscow, men and women, with bandages over their shoulders, down with shame. We got on the tram. The tram was stopped, the public was outraged. Someone laughed to tears, someone spat. Old women crossed themselves, saying, "The apocalypse. The end of the world." And they asked passers-by in confusion, "What is it, and will it make us undress?" It was such demonstrations in 1924 that members of the Moscow Society Down with Shame began to arrange. At the same time, the demonstrators also wore flirty hats. Here it is, without pants on the hat. Nudism as a form of struggle for the liberation of women originated, as usual, in Europe, at the turn of the 19th, 20th centuries. But the revolutionary nudists declared that shame is a relic of the cursed past. Darwin's theory was cited as an argument. Once a man is descended from a monkey, then an animal, and animals do not need clothes. Do not forget, Russia really experienced simply unthinkable changes in all spheres of life. Not so long ago, Russian women were practically the property of their husband and did not have their own passports. They were not taken to universities. Women fought for the right to paid work, practically had no opportunity to divorce. And after the revolution, Alexandra Kollontai became a female government minister for the first time in history, and subsequently the world's first female diplomat. Unthinkable. In post-revolutionary Russia in the 17th century, for the first time in history, women legally received equal rights with men in everything. For comparison, women received only the right to vote in France in the 44th, and in Switzerland only in 1990. In the West, up to 1974, in order to open a bank account or get a license, a woman had to provide a certificate from her spouse. Can you imagine? So in this we were definitely ahead of the whole planet. Through the efforts of our heroine, a decree on civil marriage was adopted, which replaced church marriage, established the equality of spouses and equalized the rights of illegitimate children with lawborn. It was even too easy to get a divorce now. This law was, again, much more progressive than in the rest of the world. Kollontai was also outraged that a woman was enslaved by a life that was completely on her, and in order to free women, she was promoting the construction of a nursery and kindergartens throughout the country, as well as child benefits for mothers. Of course, it was not easy to destroy the traditional relations that had existed for centuries. The traditional family, even with the light hand of Marx, was considered a way of oppressing women. A new woman, in Kallontai's opinion, should defend her rights, be demanding of a man, because he is no longer a breadwinner. At the same time, she must respect both her own and his freedom. And, of course, no jealousy. A new woman should have her own hobby, and most importantly, not consider, as in the 19th century, love as the center of the universe and her only purpose. She should calmly perceive it as one of the sides of life, and at the same time, do away with traditional motherhood. In the new society, children should become pupils of the state, not moms and dads. After such reforms, women, they say, will finally be freed from oppression and will receive the long-awaited freedom and will be able to fully devote themselves to the construction of communism. Komsomol members rushed especially zealously to promote new sexual values. They went with lectures even to distant villages, where at village gatherings they were convinced of the need for free love. As a result of such rampant freedom of experimentation in the intimate sphere, the number of rapes grew rapidly in the 20s. In 1929, the Supreme Court decides to initiate numerous criminal cases against those bosses who require women to engage in sexual relations with them with gratitude, the so-called women's tips. The most high-profile case in 1926 even led to the appearance of the term Chubarovshkina on Chubarovsky Lane in Leningrad, in which workers, party members and Komsomol members brutally raped a girl, also a factory worker. At the trial, the criminal said, "A woman is not a person, but only a female. Every woman is a girl who can be treated as she pleases." Society was particularly indignant, since the accused were sure that this was the Soviet norm. The sentence was harsh. 7 participants were sentenced to death, the remaining 19 criminals were exiled to Solovki. 1918 Europe was shocked by the advanced Soviet free mores. A loud sensation broke out. The Bolsheviks made wives common. All the newspapers reprinted a new decree on the socialization of Russian ladies and maidens, according to which, allegedly, all women aged from 17 to 32 years were withdrawn from private ownership and declared property, the property of the people. This decree on polygamy allegedly defined the rules of registration of women in the Soviet way and the procedure for using, I quote, copies of the national heritage. The famous English writer H.G. Wells was intrigued by this decree, which was widely covered in the European press, and even specially came to Moscow, where Lenin personally assured him that the central organs of the party had nothing to do with this document. The author of the unsuccessful joke turned out to be a certain Kvatov, the owner of a manufactory shop. The investigation found out that Kvatov had already begun to implement his personal decree by organizing a palace of love of communards in his hut. The prosecutors asked the court to sentence him to imprisonment for 5 years, but our heroine Alexandra Kollontai intervened in the case. Kvatov was released. However, he was not happy for long. The next day he was killed by anarchists. In general, the rampant freedom in the sexual sphere has clearly begun to get out of control of the authorities. At first, as Ivan Solinovich, who worked at the same time, writes to journalists, Komsomol members suddenly began to marry en masse and leave the Komsomol and factories. They explained it to Solinovich like this, and I quote, "They guys generally want to have a family like people, without divorce and all sorts of things. And that's why they don't get married at the registry office, but at dad's. It's still more correct." And one of the former Komsomol members even told him, "Comrade Solinovich, we'll tell you straight out, I'm marrying a woman, not a party. Here's where one of our fools got married to a Komsomol member. At home there is dirt, there is no one to sew a button, they feel their wife, who is not lazy. If the children go, I don't know yet." And what about our heroine? The Valkyrie of the Revolution, as she was called, at the age of 45, for the first time in her life, fell madly in love with a simple revolutionary sailor Pavel Debenko, who was much younger than her. He was only 28 years old. She immediately forgot about her own statements that the family had gone, and married Pavel. But the young husband turned out to be a follower of the principles formulated by her and demonstrated complete freedom of love. Calling on Soviet women to abandon bourgeois jealousy and respect the freedom of men, Alexandra Kollontai was furiously jealous, digging into his pockets and so on. To quote her diary, 12 o'clock at night. "Now I'm almost sure that Pavel has someone on the side. The woman may not even be alone. I understand everything, but I'm ashamed of myself. So there is jealousy after all." They still broke up, and our heroine went abroad, becoming first a diplomat, and then the Soviet ambassador to Sweden. The first female ambassador in the world, mind you. Only the young state became stronger, it began to struggle with sexual permissiveness. In the mid-20s, the USSR found out that sexual freedom led to unpleasant consequences for society, a large number of abandoned children, an increase in the number of single mothers and outbreaks of sexually transmitted diseases. I must say that the party leaders were initially critical of the theory of a glass of water and such permissiveness. Lenin rejected it altogether. According to the memoirs of Clara Zetkin, he called her completely non-Marxist and, moreover, antisocial. To quote Lenin, "From this theory of a glass of water, our youth went mad, just went mad. She became the evil fate of many young girls." Lunacharsky was also against it. He insisted that the love between a man and a woman would remain under socialism, even though it would differ from the old regime. I quote, "Serious, deeply restrained, thoughtful, beautiful love should be with us instead of the debauchery of the bourgeoisie and the nihilistic view of naked sexual need. That's it." In 1924, Aaron Zalkin's article "The 12 Sexual Commandments of the Revolutionary Proletariat" was published, which caused a great resonance in society. Now the new morality was completely different. The first commandment of the proletariat is that there should not be too early development of sexual life, and in general, complete abstinence before marriage, and marriage can only be entered into in a state of full maturity at 20-25 years, not earlier. The seventh commandment stated that love should be completely monogamous, there should be no jealousy in the relationship. There should also be no courtship, flirting. The selection of partners should be carried out strictly along the line of class revolutionary proletarian expediency. Here is such a reversal. The Komsomol's approach has also radically changed. By the mid-30s, such cases as at the Trekbornaya manufactory factory, wherein the 35th Komsomol Bureau expelled a young locksmith from the Komsomol for, quote, courting 2 girls at the same time, had become commonplace. The country of the crazy sexual revolution was replaced by the USSR, well known to us, in which the 12 sexual commandments of the proletariat were implemented. Now premarital sexual intercourse has finally passed into the category of manifestations of a pernicious capitalist lifestyle. And even the fact of an official divorce could put a stigma on the future fate and career of communists and Komsomol members.